First of all, I got a little bit of housekeeping to do. I want to thank Bob Grafe and Maud for setting up the coffee and the registration type of thing, and Ray Stone-Cipher for getting the place and the arrangements here at the Crossroads. Bathrooms, if anybody's curious, are down one level to the left. Coffee's available in the back. Wait a minute, did I get this bathrooms and coffee backward or whichever? I'd also like to introduce real quickly some of the DPO board that's here. Elaine is on the board, I am. Ray Stone-Cipher, he may have left. He's, I never knew he raced Porsches in his earlier ages, but he had a reunion, so he went. Russ May is in the back. Pat Miller is here. Nice gray-haired lady up on the top. Peter Sigmund, over here. And I think that's pretty much
Charlie.
Who?
Yes. Charlie.
Oh yeah, okay. Yeah, Charlie Jarman is hiding in the back there. And that's the board pretty much for DPO. Let's see, who else we missed? Nancy, there she is. Boy, she's hard to find sometimes. Nancy Paulin. This session is kind of as a result of the discussions this last winter and coming into the spring. And they're still continuing about, and now DPO got into the whole thing, about the questions and stuff concerning the large developments that were proposed in Sturgeon Bay. And these same kind of developments are happening in other parts of the state. There's one in Minocqua, one in Rhinelander, one in Stoughton. And you start playing around on the internet and you find them all over the place, the questions. The questions are a lot the same. This could conceivably happen too in other parts of the county. So while Wal-Mart has been the lightning rod of this whole discussion, Home Depot, Lowe's, and others have also been mentioned. And there are other large-scale developments that, not that type necessarily, that come under the label big box, since traditionally they've been developed into large enterprises under one roof. Sometimes the buildings are quite similar, and they're big square, and everything is under that, and hence the name big box. We explained in our letter to the city officials of Sturgeon Bay, and the one we sent to our members, that we're not advocating or condemning the development. Rather, we're advocating the reasonable development that follows the rules that are in place. The county's already got a comprehensive plan. The newer smart growth is starting to show up, and which is all a step in the right direction. However, sometimes things are done locally and possibly on the cheap, and as a result, these plans are much less than desired. Developments sometimes are not anticipated, and the plan doesn't even consider them. So what we're trying to do today is get you aware of what's happening, and if you talk to these people, these things have to be mentioned in plans. It's a situation like the Ellison Bay thing, where the explosion up there, and then you find out that propane lines can be laid any place by an owner. No maps are made. If it's traded, the property is sold to somebody else. They don't get a map usually. That's lost. So they don't know where the propane lines are. Then somebody comes in, builds a utility or anything else that they might do, they flip one of those propane lines, and then with our fractured bedrock, we've got little problems like Ellison Bay. The only time Digger's hotline is needed is if they cross public property, like a highway or a road or something. So, situations like that are part of development plans. They're part of site plans that have to be. I know Charlie was on RPC for years, and that was one of their biggest complaints. People would come into the development without a legitimate, complete site plan. It takes, with the development in Door County, it takes more than a water supply and sewage disposal and an increase in the tax base to make a property seem beneficial. And we can all cite examples of poor planning. Since DPO's mission is, quote, to provide a forum for the discussion of land use issues, to support the conservation of the Door County's natural, scenic, cultural, and aesthetic resources, and to advocate for reasoned development that respects and enhances these irreplaceable resources. That's why we decided that present this forum, and just to inform you of what's going on. I want to thank you for coming to our first forum. I think we're going to have more of them. There's one planned for the 15th of August at the Bailey's Harbor Town Hall, and that's going to be pretty much strictly on cadaver. The next night they're going to have a, BCEC is having one there, and that one's on invasive species. Cadaver is mentioned in that too, but the other invasives are being called. So you're welcome to come to vote. We want you to feel free to ask questions, give your comments. However, make all your comments brief. And remember, we're here for constructive comments, and we're not here to vilify any person, organization, or development. We're all in this together, and we're trying to create a better Door County community. One thing also on your comments, I was reading a quote the other night, I forget who it was by, but he said, all comments have a beginning and an end. And the closer you put them together, the better it is. So, if I think you're getting more out of order, I'm going to cut you off. It's very simple. If we go on a rant someplace, I'll just stand up and say, that's enough. Be constructive, and remember, tact is the art of opening your mouth without putting your foot in it. To keep your words soft and sweet, because you never know when you're going to have to eat. In that light, I'm going to be happy to present Elaine Carmichael, Economic Stewardship Incorporated. Elaine's a member of our board, and she's been in the business of helping communities investigate, develop, and implement comprehensive plans that will enhance their economic opportunities, while at the same time retaining the things that make these communities unique and comfortable places to live. So, for some background in this development situation, to facilitate, my tongue isn't like this today, and to facilitate the discussion, I want to welcome Elaine Carmichael.
Well, some people say that I sound like Julia Child. So I apologize in advance if that grates on your nerves. We are going to be, we're working without, some would say we're working without a net. We're also working without a mic. So we'll all need to speak up today and let me know if you can't hear me, because my voice may have a smile in it, but it's not a very loud voice. That's a little bit about me and Kip and DPO. I'm curious to find out who all you are and what brought you here. If you could, maybe we could just quickly go around the room and you could just tell me your names and what, keeping in mind Kip's admonishment, in 10 words or less, what brought you here? Maybe starting with Pat at the back.
Pat Miller, I'm a member of the DPO board, very interested in the new comprehensive plan that the county is putting together, and this will be groundwork for that.
Gene Mitchell, I came just for information.
Jim Bernclaw, I'm a member of DPO and here for information.
Charlie Jarman, I'm a DPO board member, ex-politician, and a farmer.
And farmer. Sir.
Dave Resch, Door County property owner. I'm not a member of the organization, and I'm here just for informational purposes.
Nice to hear.
Yeah. Sharon and Ron, can you just look up worse, same thing, just for information, just property owners and Door County.
Ron, you okay with that?
Okay, we'll agree with that. He doesn't like to talk.
Okay, sir.
Fred Lockwood, I'm a member, here
Okay.
for information.
Great.
Lorraine Wiegand, member, ditto, for information. Maud Grave, I'm here because you are the speaker. Glad to hear you once again.
Checks in the mail, Mom. Thank you for that note of fandom.
Don Fensick, been a member probably since 1976. Allison Bay, just here, find out more about development and why it's happening.
Teresa Franzek, also a member, just for information.
March thing, same thing.
Sir, Richard.
Richard, dedicated for DPO members, we're here to learn more about the project.
Okay.
Christy Weber, Bear Enterprise, we're here to learn more.
You're on.
I'm Ellen Woodward.
Jill Booster, I'm running for Wisconsin State Senate, and I want to hear what people are thinking of us.
I'm Elder Kaiser, DPO member, here for information.
Dolores Spencer, interested in what happens on Door County.
As are we all.
Elaine Kedwin, that's a troublemaker.
He means it. He's not kidding.
Janet Fitch, I'm up visiting my friend, and I am a landowner in Door County, and I'm really happy that she got me here.
Okay, and you're the friend of Janet.
I'm the friend of Janet. I'm Mary Lacey, a property owner and member.
Okay. Kurt Pagel goes by Kip. Kip, you've met.
I'm a DPO member. I'm also a trustee on the Village Bank Harbor Board. I'm just interested in learning more about how this process is going to go forward.
Awesome. Peter.
Peter Sigmund, Little Sturgeon. I'm interested in sustainable lifestyle, sustainable development, etc.
Judy Renninger, we're members, also DCEC and Wild Ones Natural Landscapers, and looking for information.
Don Cardona, Smart Growth from Hills Energy, curious.
Barbara
Succinct. Sorry. Barbara.
Barbara Buckingham, a property owner, and I liked the way this forum was presented in terms of pros and cons and looking at knowing the development is going to happen, but how can we have it happen appropriately?
Great.
Jane Lena, DPO member in Harvard.
Want to find out more? Sir?
Dale Phillips, Sturgeon Bay, just looking for information.
Patrick Fitzgerald, a member, interested in information.
Judy Fitzgerald, same.
Mike Nivet, Glidden Drive resident, member of DPO.
John Gleason, just information.
Jerry Bloom, DPO member. Happy to see that we have a forum for both sides.
Corinne Comrie, Fish Creek, all of the above.
Eric Comrie, here for information.
Sir?
Edward C. Lucker.
I'm Ella Lucker, and we're Door County property.
And I missed your first name, I'm sorry.
Lucker. Ella.
Ella. Okay.
Chris and Alan Moon, here to learn.
Okay. You're good with that description?
Jean Setterholm, Sturgeon Bay, not a member, here to get a report to give to the Sustainable Sweden group that's meeting tomorrow, and also to keep Peter Sigmund honest. Sorry, Peter.
Ray Barrington, Door County Advocate, covering the meeting.
Dynamite. And I saw some people sneak in while we were going around. I know there were some people here.
It was a question, why
Who
we're here.
are you and why are you here?
Okay, I'm a Grail, and I'm just really interested in the community and what's happening with development.
Dynamite. And in the back, we have Bob. Great.
Yeah, Bob Gray, member of the board. Also had a ring for the coffee rolls, and there's plenty here, so please, everybody.
And we're also quite pleased that we have we're being documented here today by a fabulous volunteer videographer who is
Justin Moravec.
Dynamite. Justin, thank you. Just because you're behind the camera doesn't mean that you can't participate. Well, thank you all for coming, and thank you for introducing yourselves. It's great that we've got a mix of people from different communities around the county. We've got some members, we've got some non-members. It sounds like we've got folks who are all across the spectrum of opinions, attitudes, concerns, and hopes surrounding big box development. Mostly what we're going to do today is hear from you. As Kip said at the beginning of the meeting today, we are about Door County property, Door property owners is about learning more about what people here think so that we can do a better job of representing not only what our members would like to see us advocate and advance, but also to find out about opinions in general in the community so we can ensure that we're doing a good job as a whole advancing our own mission. So we are committed to creating this forum for points of view from all sides. And essentially the process that's going to happen is that there's going to be brief remarks by me so that we're all kind of using the same vocabulary and coming with at least one common level of information. But most of the sessions today are going to be an opportunity for you to share comments, which we will record, and any of you of whom you are interested, it's contagious. Any of you who are interested in getting synopses of this forum, we would be happy to provide same. Your remarks will be written up in a document memorializing today's events. So life is good. A couple of things. Kip mentioned some ground rules, and we were working across purposes. I made a few. Never run with scissors. And because after it's a hot day, I thought it was important after you leave here to wait 30 minutes after eating before swimming. I'm going to be writing down your comments, so it's important to me that spelling doesn't count if you're going fast. So if you're going fast, you often can't tell exactly what words you're supposed to read. But for our sake, and because we don't have any microphones, one person talking at a time is good, and staying positive and focused is good, as Kip said. Part of that is maintaining the right level of detail. I kind of liken it to altitude in a plane. There are many ways to look at big box issues, from out at the space shuttle level, where you see the Earth spinning in the distance and want to think about international relations and what's the impact on our broad economy and the role of China and other emerging countries in our retail life. That would be one enormous level of altitude at several hundred miles. Much closer to Earth, we could spend this entire 2-hour session talking about a specific proposal or a specific site. And what I want to find for us is an altitude that maybe is at about 3,000, 5,000 feet, maybe something else, maybe something like that, where we're looking at our county as a whole without paying too close attention to particular jurisdictions, because we are one community, we are one economy, and we are one county, regardless of where our jurisdictional lines fall. And also addressing the fact that while this issue may have been prompted by recent activities surrounding annexation of land in Nassauwappee or Wal-Mart's proposal for the land at the intersection of Alabama and 4257, that in fact we're going to be facing these kinds of issues over time, probably for 20, 30, 50 more years, as long as this particular variety of retail shopping experience remains popular and economically viable. So what's important is not to delve too far into the specifics of one particular circumstance, but for us to think broadly about the shape of our county and how we can manage that over time by taking advantage of the fact that these particular proposals have brought these issues to the fore. So with that, I'm going to start with a couple of brief slides before we get into our first round of conversation. You know by now that this is sponsored by DPO. You've met Kip, you've met me. Essentially what we're going to do is have a little conversation about big box basics, followed by a discussion of your hopes and fears and dreams and challenges around this topic, and then take a look at what other communities around the country have done to shape the role big boxes play or do not play in their community life, in their economy, in the character of their built environment. And from that, we will have a rather lengthy conversation about the kinds of options that you see making sense for you as a resident of Door County, as a person who loves this area, as a shopper, as an employee or an employer, and as a person with that long view towards understanding the role that our economy, our built environment plays in forming the character of this place that we all love. So with that, large format retail. People generally agree it's about places that are over 100,000 square feet. To give you a point of comparison, a football field is 300 feet by, I think, 140 feet for the playing area, not counting the end zones or the sidelines. So that would be, they are not the same as football fields. They only sometimes feel that way when you're inside. They tend to be freestanding, they tend to be one single large room, they tend to be one single story, although that one story can be 25 or 30 feet tall, so they have a presence on the landscape that is larger than their description. They are typically single-use occupancy buildings, and they are also notable from the air because their parking lot so exceeds the building footprint that's on the ground. There are actually two different kinds, but we can just refer to them generically as big boxes here unless you would like to make a distinction. There are the general merchandise sort of big box, the Wal-Marts, the Targets, the Kmarts, that carry a lot of different types of goods and only a few choices within those types. There is another form of big box known in the industry as category killer, which carries just a few types of items but has an awful lot of selections. And the few types of items might relate to a category like staples with office supplies, or it might relate to a pastime like Cabela's, say, around outdoor life and hunting and so forth. And there are legion of category killers as well. One of the things that's happening, particularly in urban areas, is that, and suburban areas, in places with more population, is that the role of both the general merchandise form of big box and the category killer form of big box is changing. In a lot of cities, they're actually moving into downtowns, and they are coming up with multi-story formats and changing the ways that they go. That's particularly true for the category killers. But you even see the likes of Wal-Marts making inroads into New York City and places like that, as well as over the last decade, a number of the category killer varieties. There's a section of Broadway where there's a whole bunch of them clustered. And at the same time, in the suburbs, some of these category killers and big boxes are taking over spaces in formerly traditional shopping centers, in part because we've had a consolidation of the department store industry, so there's a lot of empty space. There's also been, as you know from living around here, immense consolidation in the industry with the decline of Kmart, the rise of Wal-Mart. In the home improvements category, there's been massive shifts as Lowe's and Home Depot are particularly coming out on top at the expense of places like Hackinger's and other ones. And around here, it'll be interesting to see what happens in that is Home Depot and Menards and so forth battle it out for supremacy. Very few land use issues prompt the kind of passion that big boxes do. Some people are huge advocates of them, and they believe in lower prices. They believe in the convenience aspects of it. Some folks just absolutely refuse to ever set foot in them if they can possibly avoid it. Some of the loathing of big boxes is specific to particular operators of them. Some people have a particular distaste for one company over another. And then some folks kind of think they're fine as long as they're somewhere else. They don't want to look at them, but they'll go to Green Bay to shop at the Staples or to go to Home Depot. And that's a complicated position. But in any event, there's a spectrum, and it's useful to understand the other points of view. The people who love them, we talked a little bit about low prices. We could also, any single one of these points around either the loving or loathing side is open to a massive amount of debate that has inspired huge amounts of economic analysis and is utterly unclear. So, for example, the point about low prices is understood by some as a simple fact that you go into the store and there's the item and it costs less, and is understood by others as the point of a wedge of a massive problem that has to do with things like wages and inflation and where things are bought, and whether or not our community as a whole is benefiting from the existence of that place, or whether we're paying for it in other ways, or whether we're paying for it in terms of increased taxes or whatever. So let me just reassure all of you that I recognize how complicated all of these issues are, and that conversation is fair in this forum to raise. Choice is another thing that attracts people, particularly in the category killers, where I personally have a pen fetish. Whenever I'm depressed, nothing cheers me up like buying a new pen and some new paper. It's a cheap thrill, try it. And it makes me feel like the world is fresh and clean, and I can start over. And somehow, all of the ideas are just going to miraculously flow from my brain, out through my arm, into the pen, and across this beautiful landscape with utterly pristine, well, never mind, I have a pen fetish. So I am completely, I love to be confronted with a rack of 500 kinds of pens. It just completely turns me on, and then you know too much about me. But nonetheless, that's true. The notion of convenience around one-stop shopping, that you only have to park once, you can stick your kids in one cart and drag them around and be fine. There are some people who feel that regardless of their personal attitude towards any particular big box or category, that they must support them because it is consistent with their view of America. And this is a complicated thing because the other side believes this too. And but the people who feel that big boxes should be allowed look at stuff like the primacy of market forces, the notion that competition is what makes this country great, and we're not subsidizing buggy whip manufacturers anymore. So why should we be subsidizing, little businesses in downtowns that can't hack it? And last but not least, the notion of property rights, and that if they buy the property, it's their right to do with it what they want. This gets complicated for folks who, for other reasons, don't like them at all, and yet find themselves in some kind of internal contradiction, because on the one hand, they don't want to drive by it, and on the other hand, they respect its right to exist. Looking at the other point of view, why loathe them, there has been a lot of work that tries to assess the impact of big boxes on local small businesses and the vitalities of Main Street. And this is a complicated issue too, because if there is evidence that big boxes help contribute to the demise of small businesses. However, there is also evidence that if those small businesses adapt and wind up competing in some other way, whether choice, customer service, character, etc., that or shifting to a different market segment, that they can actually do better if it is true that more people come to town to shop because of the big box. I talked before about complicated issues. This gets into a whole one of, well, gee, are there really any more people coming to shop here at all? I mean, we're fundamentally an island. So, any additional dollars directed to any given big box is probably avoided leakage degree bet. But is it actually true that any of these places offer more choice? So it gets very complicated and it gets very difficult to turn around, which leads many folks to focus on the character aspects of big boxes, because this is much easier to debate. It's like, do you think they're big and ugly and out of scale for your community? If so, it's very easy to be against them without getting embroiled in the complicated arguments about the impact on the local economy or whether or not it's ethically correct to support them. Because the big boxes, they are big and bulky. They are not going to win any architectural awards for greatness, let's just say. And they are contributors to sprawl. They are often the leading edge of sprawl. They certainly encourage it because once they're there, other folks want to be near them to ride the coattails of convenience of proximity. And then when they're done with their buildings, they leave them behind. And we have a number of those buildings here. And it's a problem because that too not only creates this blighted space, but is another contributor to sprawl because the next one will leapfrog over it in order to get a new building. When I talked before about supporters who feel that their position is consistent with their view of America, and there's an entirely other view that says, hey, supporting Walmart is against my view of America because it leads to jobs being shoved overseas. There's, and I just said Walmart, I didn't mean to, it just popped out. But that supporting big boxes is driving jobs overseas. There's uncomfortable questions about child labor. There's uncomfortable questions about whether the wages are fair, how come there's not more benefits, whether or not those jobs are actually help drive economies down because they're not paying enough of a living wage and therefore creating a population that requires additional public support. And that, last but not least, some of the tactics that those companies use to stay competitive, you know, forcing their suppliers to offer particular products at particular prices, the burden they place on the roads with their oddball distribution systems and all of that kind of stuff. For many people, that does not square with their notion of what this country is about and what this country supports. So both sides can claim the high road in that regard. So for our first set of discussion topics here, I would like to know what you all think. Where are you on the spectrum? If one end of the spectrum is over my dead body, no way, no how, not here, never, no more, that would be one end. If the other end of the spectrum is, this is going to be great, no more trips to Green Bay, thank God I can find 500 pets. Oh wait, no, that was me. If that's the other end of the spectrum, and there's a huge area in between that says, well, you know, there's good points and bad points, it would be okay with me if we could do X. Where do some of you fall? And I'm going to record some of this down. And this is the part where spelling doesn't count. Barbara, were you just raising your hand?
Oh, no. She was saying where she was at, and I said, well, I'm on this side of the middle.
Okay.
You know, if you take the middle, I'm on that side. So I'm
are
closer
you-
to over my dead body than I can't wait, but I'm open, somewhat.
Okay, so and let me see if I'm hearing you right. You belong to the tribe that would like to ensure that any big box that arrived was done sensitively with regard to what? Some of your, go ahead.
Well, I spoke with someone that worked at Wal-Mart and asked if in fact the bigger store came, would they begin hiring people that are part-time, full-time, and then begin giving them benefits? And she had said their manager had indicated that, but she also suggested I call and express my opinion directly, which I thought was kind of an interesting thing. The other thing is I heard about a Walmart that was 2-story, and it had some kind of escalator that you could take your card up on or something. So I was wondering, why do we need to create another space? Isn't there something they could do within the space now? And the other interesting thing, and I don't know if they position themselves to have their personnel say this, but like I overheard the woman telling her, well, because of our limited space, we don't have the choices in shoes, because she was looking for some particular kind of shoe. And I bought my shoes at Walmart, I have to admit, and they have Dr. Scholl's. And so it's not that I never shop there, but I usually try and shop like at the hardware store on 3rd Avenue, because I feel they know more, they have service, and I want to support a local business. That would be just one example, but it's not that I never go in Walmart.
So you
Probably
support
said
the
too much.
Okay. Another comment.
Could I just ask, was this an issue when Target came in? Did I not notice? I mean, you list Target and Walmart on the same page. I don't consider them on the same page, but it is a big store.
Remember that part where I said that some people had particular animosity for a particular store? Target doesn't seem to inspire the same animosity as a company, but it raises many of the same issues as a building.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was not here when the Target discussion was going on, so Christy.
There was a war, but it was fought by a smaller group of individuals, more within the city of Sturgeon Bay.
Does that become a problem when you stop a Walmart, when you allow the Target, or not?
I think you learn by your mistakes.
And is that a
enforce
mistake?
it. And, you know, they annexed land, spent a lot of money to have a grocery store there for the west side, and no grocery store came, so the hypocrisy of extending it a few blocks out, or a few miles out again, under the same little carrot. It worked the first time.
Further comment, Charlie?
I believe that the best way to do it is to allow Wal-Mart to build to the local community's plan specifications and put in our little quirk, what you call our quirk to architecturally wise. I firmly believe in a large parking lot. I'm sorry, but I do not like to walk a half a mile down the street to get to a store. I'm somewhat handicapped. I do not like a big box store because it's too far to walk inside the store. I went to Green Bay and I tried it out, tried it on for size. I got halfway through and I said, this ain't worth it. Now people will vote with their feet. If they like Target so well, the Walmart parking lot would be empty. And I think Target is pretty much the closest thing to Green Bay that we have as far as a big box store. There's no other way to call it. And I think the secret is in the plan it so that it is acceptable here. See that the other store is either demolished or put to use. And I'm a farmer, practical as can be. I cannot afford to shop in some of the shops on 3rd Avenue. I'm sorry. And it's a plain, simple thing. When I was a boy, we had all of our stores on 3rd Avenue. This apparently wasn't what most of the people wanted. Because we have our stores out beyond 3rd Avenue, and we have these specialty shops, kindly call them specialty shops, on 3rd Avenue, that most of the local people, or a good share of the local people, or working people, do not patronize. So, I'm a firm believer in free enterprise.
Another comment. Actually, Christy, and then I'm going to come over here to Jerry, and then to person whose name I'm blanking on. Oh, I'm sorry, was it you? I just saw the wrong hand.
It's okay, Christy raised her hand.
I didn't know she didn't.
Ellen, do you have your hand raised?
Yes.
Okay, so Ellen and then Jerry.
Okay. I guess my main concern is water quality, and I guess from that standpoint, and sprawl is another big problem. So I guess that would preclude to find any farmland outside of town to put a huge box. Yet a larger impervious surface that would jeopardize water quality, or that would play a part in jeopardizing. But I guess I don't have a problem with Walmart wanting to take their existing store and put a second store in. It would be just fine if they don't have to add any more asphalt.
Great. Jerry.
When we moved here about 10 years ago, my husband asked the manager at Walmart at the time something about why there wasn't a super Walmart, or why there wasn't more selection in the Walmart that was there. And he said the population did not support it. Now, I don't believe in 10 years that our population has grown in Sturgeon Bay or the county that much to sustain a super Walmart or a large big box facility that hasn't already been addressed by additional stores like Target.
And that, we're at that point, we're we're going to come back to later when we talk about different kinds of impacts and analyses a community can require to determine whether the whole desire to build one is valid. Jean?
That's exactly the point I wanted to make. And I haven't researched it, but I assume that Target has done a market study. And the question is whether legally, some way or other, back door, front door, you can require a market study, because that's what we're talking about in terms of competition, in terms of wages, in terms of what's offered, in terms of the fact that we have an economy that is highly dependent on, especially outside of Sturgeon Bay, highly dependent on tourism, which tends to be, although the Chamber of Commerce would not like to be, seasonal.
Yes, and raising the question of the tourist market, the tourist share of the market, is the point of the wedge of another huge set of issues about the extent to which the tourists contribute to market support for a super Wal-Mart or any other big box versus the extent to which tourism is diminished because the Door County experience is to some degree less what they were seeking in the first place. And that also goes to siting. It also goes to siting. Where do you put the new development like that? Do you put it in a place that's cherished, or do you put it in a place that has always traditionally been used for large-scale retail? Peter, did I see your hand up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What were you going to say?
I'm concerned about transportation and sustainability aspects thereof. If you look at the map of your county, it's a very elongated county. Every other county in Wisconsin is pretty much square, which means we're distance challenged. It doesn't make sense to centralize shopping in this geography. You'd want to be able to buy diapers and screws and so on in Ellison Bay or in Sister Bay and reliably, and not have to drive to Sturgeon Bay in this day and age when everybody wants to reduce driving. If there's too much centralized shopping, people will just have to depend on mail order, and instead of having people employed in stores, well, the UPS driver will get that money, which is all right too, but it's just a fact.
Interesting point, because the big boxes do raise all these other things. Jean, did you have a point to finish, and then I want to come over?
No, I just wanted to respond to Peter's comment, and that's one reason to do a very intensive market study, and that's why I raised tourism.
Right.
Because once, when Target first came in and it was so empty, I said to somebody, why in the world did they build here? And they said, well, they're waiting for the tourists.
Okay, Pat, and then I want to come back over here after Pat to Ron, and then to Charlie, and then to Christy, who I swear has her arm up this time. Okay, Pat.
I think when I think of it, we're talking big box, but when you go back to when Target was looking at starting their place here, that at the time was big box. Now big box means bigger.
Right.
You know, we're talking bigger box. We're talking, if we were talking Target being the first to say they wanted to have a Target Greatland here, then that would be the lightning rod. And because of the competition with these stores in the big box arena, whoever gets to have that biggest one first might be the one that dominates and drives the other one out of business. So it raises the question of where does it stop? And the current big boxes doesn't indicate that those will be as large as we start, in the future. They might not be enough. So it comes back to what you talked about in the beginning about ordinances and regulations.
And it also comes back to the abandoned building point that we talked about earlier.
Yep.
Bob, I'll come to you. I promised the floor to some other folks, and then I'll come back to you. I think I promised the floor to you.
Right. I'm just concerned of, like, the Kmart that you have here in Sturgeon Bay. It's empty, it has been empty for years. And it's just like an eyesore. We have some of that, excuse me, around the county where various different stores have emptied out, and then you have just an empty building. You have a lot of them in Sister Bay. You know, they build a bigger place, and then the smaller one is empty, and no one comes in to replace it. You have a lot of shops, and they're empty. They don't rent them, and it becomes just an empty box. And I'm thinking, you know, before I used to have all little different diversity, and somehow that's starting to disappear.
There are actually communities where a company will abandon their building and then they won't sell it or lease it to anybody else because they don't want to put a building that could accommodate a competitor on the market. One of the things we'll talk about later is what communities have done to avoid that, kind of to get to your point.
Yeah, we're from Sturgeon Bay. We've just lost an excellent landmark and tremendous store. And, you know, now where we have to travel 5 miles to Sister Bay, you know, it's sad in a way, it really is. And what's even sadder is like the thought that what could have happened, or it hasn't been proven yet, I don't think, because of development, because they disturbed some land that was sitting down there for years. And that is sad, really sad.
It is. And I've lost track of who I promised the floor to. I think it was Charlie, and then Christy, and then Bob. Did I leave anyone out?
Do you want to dictate who will pay what wages to what employee? I think that if you're going to do something like that, it would require an ordinance that you would have to say, well, all right, you restaurants, you no longer can rely on tips for your waitresses. You will pay this wage. If you're going to require a store to pay that wage, you also should require anyone else. They're on a minimum wage. Many of these people are retired. Many of these people are my close friends that work there. And they are relying on this for their pocket money. Social Security, you know, don't go very far. And when you come to dictating what wages you're going to pay, you start dictating what competition you're going to have. And I can understand that because when I was a boy, we went to Green Bay to do all our major purchases. Do you want that again with this day of sales tax being credited to your community, your county sales tax be credited to your community? If you do not make reasonably priced products available in a convenient location, that's what you'll have. The 4-lane highway is opening up and it'll go a lot faster than it used to.
Yes.
Yeah, I think all of these things need to be considered, whether you're going to let somebody do business here.
Your point about the sales tax situation is an interesting one too, because that's a double-edged sword. And on the one hand, you have the threat of losing sales tax or recapturing sales tax that's already leaked out as being a driving argument both for and against it. And so it's an interesting one. Christy and then Bob.
I just wanted to say I'm just like an inch and an eighth on the scale over my dead body, but I'm not willing to kill myself. And I wanted to also address her comments about the market study and feasibility studies, and our group has taken a lot of time pushing that at the city level, which is the driver on this. And And there is a very small controlling faction of aldermen for it that actually have refused that. So that's not even an option. And we've done everything, including our city planner, who's not pushed for that as an option. So, so I don't see that entering in unless we have a change of politicians, and I don't see that going on within the next year or so. I did want to add that free enterprise, and fair enterprise. City of Sturgeon Bay taxpayers are asked to subsidize the land that's being requested on these big box developments, which none exist within the city of Sturgeon Bay. The road costs and the water and sewer lines, which the taxpayers of the city of Sturgeon Bay add up to over, $300,000.
Is that the capital cost or an annual cost?
That's capital. The annual costs are going to be much greater. There's going to be required employees for road plowing. There's going to be required staff for police and fire protection, which these new developments are going to force onto the taxpayers of Sturgeon Bay, who are also overtaxed and one of the highest taxed, and one of the poorest communities in the county. So there's a different perspective within the community. There's a push for this to go and be built outside of the community, but be subsidized by the taxpayer who's losing their store that's convenient to them. So it's easy for a Nassawapian to say, I want a grocery store by me, paid for by the city of Sturgeon Bay taxpayers. It's kind of a goofy thing, but we lose valuable lands, landscaping, and there is no benefit. It is an island community. There is no new dollars that are going to be generated to be flowing into this store. It's going to be taking away from Sister Bay, from Fish Creek, from Egg Harbor's Main Street Market, from merchants in Brussels. There is no new dollar. We have 2.2 million visitors that come. There are no new visitors being created. As a matter of fact, that's on a decline. And with gas prices skyrocketing out of control, I really believe that big boxes are dead boxes. And we are going to, as an economy, go back to local shopping.
Great model. And I think you got very well. But it was just a cogent summary of your position. Bob, and then I want to come back over here, and then back around again. Bob.
I want to comment because you were talking about Target, and I want to use that as an example. The Target thing took them quite a few years to do, and the community as a whole put a lot of restrictions on Target. They had to be off of the main drag. They had to be back way. They had to pay for the infrastructure of the traffic light. They had to pay for a roadway to come off of whatever that other road is there where you can get into Target. The original idea of Target was to have a grocery store there. Festival Foods was one of them. When they found out with their market research that Wal-Mart was coming in without such restrictions, they decided there was no way that they could be where Target is. Here comes Wal-Mart, and all of a sudden we're going to allow them to be on the highway, or we're going to have them into the farmland there with special assessments, special traffic lights, and so on. Also, we're talking about Target being 100,000 or less. We're talking about Walmart being up to 200 and some thousand square feet. There's a big, big difference. A big difference. And that, I think, is the unfairness of it. And I believe that we have to stop subsidizing a big box like, and I'll say it, Walmart, because we got to put some stop to it, and we got to stop paying the taxpayers' money, whether it be Sturgeon Bay, whether it be the rest of Door County, to facilitate something like this. And I think that people should know that Target had those restrictions put on, and they're not being put on Walmart. In fact, they're annexing, as she said, Nawasapee, will be part of this city of Sturgeon Bay. Taxpayers will have to pay for it.
Right. The
That is not right.
Just for people who don't know, the annexation on the National Level side has gone through. Mike?
I'd like to see some information on loss of property value, loss of income, and loss of revenue that come about from the gradual and inexorable decline of Cherry Point Mall. Now, in my mind,
Cherry Point Mall, yeah.
in my mind, there are other factors involved, but I think that the proximity of the present Walmart is responsible for a good deal of that decline. I think we ought to have that sort of information because that would help us decide what the impact would be of another Walmart in another location on this city.
Okay, we're going to close up this section of it pretty fast, so if you don't feel like your views have been represented, we need to get your hands up. Ellen, you had your hand up before.
I just had one before.
Okay, Ellen, and then I'm going to come back across the room to Jane? Judy. Okay.
Just one point to add to what Christy was saying earlier is that the revenue that Walmart or big box would bring in, usually most of that revenue goes to another state, whereas you've got a nice downtown with small businesses, people that live and work in the community, that money gets recycled within the community. So it's a losing situation for the municipality to bring big box in because that money doesn't stay there.
Okay. Judy.
One of the questions I have is how, you have two different, you have the tourists, then you have the people who live here and need to purchase items for their day-to-day living. So the difference between a specialty shop and general merchandise, how do you make that general merchandise affordable without going to a big box? And how does it become competitive when an independent store owner is competing with a large corporation?
How to even the playing field. Good point. Anybody else want to make any comments about this particular aspect of our discussion? And friend of Mary, Janet.
Very good. I think on this particular aspect of where you have this laid out is a little too limiting. It's too polarizing, even though you're trying very, very well, I think, to expand all of the points and explaining how complicated it is. We're still kind of talking about yes or no, and the middle is very unclear. So I think that, and people are sort of identifying themselves as, I'm with the woman who's, over my dead body, almost there, but I can't quite say that. But it's important, I think, to have more gradients along the way on the spectrum. And I hope everyone sees the Wal-Mart film. I don't know if you've seen it here. This is a great place to show it. And really, what I guess I find the saddest about, I think, this conversation is nobody really talking about the beautiful character that you who live here have created and maintained. And to compare this area even to an area like central Wisconsin or small town, any other small towns and cities, it's just so different. So the total character changes, and the reason people come and the reason it's such a haven and an escape, and not disregarding all of those complicated issues that are there, but just how unique this area is, and once it's changed, it's changed. And it's really difficult to go back.
Thank you. All right. Any other closing comments before we move to the next phase of this? I think some of you will be a little more satisfied with the next chunk because it is time to talk about some more nuanced aspects of it. 2 quotes of note. Robert Wright, the Secretary of Labor and Appointment, he pointed out that Walmart exists because people are using it. People are paying for it. People are choosing to shop there. And that we're not being forced to do it. And that, in fact, some of the things that people like about big boxes in general, many of us who dislike them, actually apply to other aspects of our lives. So If you're an anti-big box person, one thing to ask yourself is, at what points in your life do you comparison shop? Do you comparison shop when you're buying airplane tickets? Are you buying stuff with, somebody mentioned mail order, or do you order stuff over the web? Do you order books from Amazon instead of buying them at the downtown? We have, my husband and I need a new car. We have a huge debate going on right now because the car I want can't be serviced here. I'm going to have to drive to either Green Bay or Appleton to get it fixed. Is that, is that right? Am I ethically, is there an ethical problem there for me? And if you start asking yourselves these questions, it's part of the same spectrum. It's part of the same drive. We want what we want it where we want. And we're a pluralistic society, and it's very illustrative to listen to radio stations that you don't listen to anymore. I'm struck that I think there's under 50 classical music stations in this country, but there's something like 500 bazillion, I don't know the actual number, country music stations, things like that. But then you look at the other side of it, and Al Mormon, who is he's an anti-sprawl guy who's been at the forefront of the Wal-Mart debates, points out that, yeah, we do all make trade-offs, and maybe the cost of your underwear isn't as important as you think it is when wrapped up against your quality of life. And that's true too. And we are a country that is increasingly becoming selective about our indulgences. And so you have, for example, the people who will happily spend $3.50 on a cup of coffee every day, and they balance that indulgence by economizing, by shopping at Target or Walmart or wherever. And as we start and if you become on a fixed income, you make those trade-offs much more consciously and deliberately than you ever did before. And so looking at your own spectrum of where do you indulge and where do you economize, and trying on a different array of those decisions can be somewhat insightful can give you some insights into what the other side is about. So if you're a person who is pro-Walmart, or pro-big box, or down on the right end of that spectrum I had, you do need to ask yourself some of the kinds of character questions that Janet was raising. That, why did I come here? I didn't come here for the shopping necessarily. I came here for the landscape. I came here for the towns. I came here because it's a quirky place, and where else am I going to find goats on the roof? And a herd of yaks I was reading about in the paper the other day. And when you catch yourself doing what we all do, and I'm definitely turning into my parents. I've been known to yell, turn that down. How can you listen to that? That's not music. No. It's not. But, the more often you find the words "when I was a kid" or something like that creeping into your voice, into your speech, it's underpinning that is the notion that change to the built environment, or change to the social environment, or change to the economic environment we all live in has gone in some way you don't like. And so that's a set of questions for the other side to ask itself that maybe illuminates why folks who are passionate about avoiding further big box incursion feel that way. So where should we try to move our government? And Christy in her remarks was talking about how the trouble getting people to recognize that maybe it was useful to require a market and feasibility analysis. DPO, as Kit mentioned in his introductory remarks, we pushed hard for that as well. We pushed hard for a series of impact analyses. And what we're hoping this forum will do in this last hour of the forum, it's about 11 now and we'll have you out at noon, will do is kind of start defining the middle. That it probably isn't realistic to expect total prohibition, and it's probably stupid to just say, oh, come on in, do whatever you want, the water's wonderful, be here now. But can we talk about what the middle is about, what our requirements might be, so we can get to a point as a community where there was some understanding that there was a basic level of consensus that if you want to come here and take advantage of the market that we offer, our spending that we offer as a community, your access to the folks who are visiting here from somewhere else who might change their minds about you because they're obliged to shop there while they're here. If you, big box developer guy or gal, want that, then you must accept this particular set of limits and prohibitions. And so what we're going to be talking about in the rest of this session is what some other communities have done, and I want to hear from you the kinds of ideas that you like for here, some of which were starting to come out in the earlier conversation. And again, because I know that some of you eat, breathe, sleep, and dream this stuff, I know that you can rattle off to me exactly what the square footage floor caps are in 40 cities around the country. And whereas other people are just beginning to think about this stuff. So we're going to have a little bit of session here on the types of responses that other communities have found work. So, what have they done? And essentially what communities look at is how to think through the big box's effects vis-a-vis the locations they choose to be in, the design of their buildings and sites, and the impact that they bring to different aspects of the community, whether it's economic, social, environmental, etc. So going through these, there's also sort of 3 different phases of intervention. And the first one that we're going to talk about is the set of requirements that some communities invoke as a condition of approval. And this goes to the various conversations that we started in on about different kinds of impact analysis. Always the following are true if the city knows at all what they're doing. That the requirements are at the applicant's cost, but performed by people who are chosen by the municipality or their agent, so that there's not any chance of bending. There are, Elaine and I do expert witness testimony around the country, and we're always amazed that the folks on the other side are often the same people over and over again. There are people out there who make their living advocating for one position or another, and it's important to avoid those. We've talked around different aspects of what economic impact might be. It's not just the multiplier effects of the spending and where it goes, although that's important. It's also what's the impact on wages in general, not just wages at the store, but wages in general. Do the big boxes paying less exert downward pressure on hourly rates for full and part-time jobs, and also similarly on the necessity, on the perceived market necessity of offering benefits to employees. What does it do to housing costs? What does it do to affordable housing issues? Do you create a population of folks who have jobs and yet can't afford to either rent or buy a median-priced house? And that's something that we would see here, I would imagine. What happens to store sales at the existing retail, in the existing array of retailers and restaurateurs and everybody else? And that is becoming a bigger and bigger question, because the larger the big boxes get, the more sectors they touch. So it's not just adding groceries, it's also adding optical, it's adding tires, it's adding a huge range of goods that compete not only with traditional retailers, but also with service providers. Some of the big new Wal-Marts coming in have banks attached to them. Adding another bank agent to the mix is a huge potential impact. So it's looking at all of the stuff that is affected and what the ensuing result is on things like sending dollars out of the local economy to be collected elsewhere, the total number of jobs, and all of the aspects of employment, benefits and wages and so forth. Fiscal impacts, as opposed to capital infrastructure impacts, are also 2 areas that need examination. Typically the infrastructure impacts are, Christy was talking about this, about water and sewer and roads and traffic and all that. But what is more insidious is the ongoing fiscal impacts, that to what extent is the net effect of the new entrant to the market generating enough taxes, property taxes, sales tax, etc., to offset the costs associated with its delivery to the market. And it isn't just protecting that particular building. It's also looking at things like, how do we pay for the remediation that is going to need to occur if there have been any of these other negative effects that we've been talking about? How do we help our existing retailers reposition if that turns out to be what's needed? How do we deal with the fact that we now have a gap between typical wages and affordable housing, if that's what turns out to be? It's understanding all of these different type impacts ahead of time so that some sort of negotiated arrangement can be reached. Environmental impacts, things like runoff, effects of impervious surface, water usage, and so forth, are legion. And again, they also go off-site. And I think it was Peter and some of the sustainability folks who were talking about increased use of roads and gas costs and so forth and what happens there. And then last but not least, requiring that there be demonstration of their claims regarding market, of their claims regarding that dollars that are now being lost elsewhere will be reclaimed, that we won't be, shipping dollars off to Green Bay or wherever. Demonstration of their claims that there will be a net increase in the number of jobs in the community. Demonstration of their claims that there exists sufficient market support to handle their addition to the market without harming others, or at least understanding what those harms might be so that people can make an informed choice. And I'm reminded of the physician's, rule, first do no harm. And that is a standard to which some communities hold these places. And another interesting aspect of this is addressing the multi-jurisdictional aspects of approval, and that since we function as a regional economy, we need to be making these decisions as a region. And this goes to some of the points that were made earlier about cross-jurisdictional subsidization when the benefits of convenience and so forth are accruing to people outside, and whether or not the costs of that to the host jurisdiction are offset by any ensuing benefits to that host jurisdiction in the form of taxes and other related revenues. Some of the tactics that communities have decided to pursue to manage this relate to size, either relating to overall square footage or to the size of the footprint, either way. Some of them relate to design and aesthetics. And this goes to things like, instead of being just a big rectangular solid on the landscape, can we have some detailing to the roof line so it's of interest and isn't just a phony little pediment? Can we have some interesting architectural treatment of the facade? Could we have windows, for example? What a concept, windows. Could we have entrances that are obvious rather than a tiny door hidden in a vast expanse of sign? Could we have colors and textures and materials that vary on the building in ways that respond to the architectural idioms that are already extant in our built environment? What about landscaping? Can we make the place pretty? Why can't there be real trees in the parking lot? Why can't there be grass? Why can't there be flowers? Why can't there be, why can't we have some green architectural treatments? And speaking of parking, how can we make the access and circulation make more sense so that you can get to the building from the parking lot, but it doesn't have to look like a vast expanse of asphalt? Another set of tactics has to do with anticipating that the building will not be used forever. So how can you, there's a number of related things. How can you anticipate that they may abandon this building and create an upfront understanding of penalties or a sinking fund that's pre-funded by the developer such that the community has a resource base to deal if and when they move away, or to force them to, or to make the punishment so onerous that it forces them not to do that, so you don't have these empty buildings lying all over the landscape. Can you ask them to wrap their building with retail? Can you ask them, because most big boxes do not, can you ask them to have other sites on the edges so that it feels more like a retail commons area? Of course, that in turn brings up, hey, aren't you just creating a whole nother load of competition for existing uses? Well, maybe, but maybe you're creating an environment that's a little bit more pleasant, that might be a little bit more pedestrian friendly. that had real sidewalks, that had some protection so that you didn't take your life in your hand when you had to go back to your car and you were dragging your screaming kid by the hand and trying to stuff him into the car seat. Oh wait, that's my grandchildren. You know, what if you made it 2 stories? Somebody mentioned in the earlier part having seen this is from a Target in Fort Lauderdale, north of Fort Lauderdale, and that's a gadget to cause a shopping cart. It's an escalator for shopping carts, and it's hard to see in this picture, but the regular, this is a really cool thing. Would it be the first escalator in Sturgeon Bay? I can't think of any escalators in Sturgeon Bay. So over here is the normal escalator, and you ride up, and meanwhile your cart goes here, and it's geared so that you get to the top first, and you wait for your cart to come off the bottom. It's very cool, and there's the downside. You know, but raising the number of stories goes to Charlie's point about how it's not just getting from the parking lot to the store, it's once you're in the store and the place is gigantic. And as well as decreasing the impervious surface and so forth. You can add on to that the notion of having structured parking to take up less room, so that it's less of an empty space, less waste of land. All of that, of course, is going to add cost. And moving into more site planning related stuff, really taking a look at what the site requires itself, and having a process within your regulatory system that forces an examination of the particular site being addressed, rather than just a bunch of generic standards that could apply anywhere, so that you can make sure that things happen, like that the site relates to, that the building relates to all streets that side it, so that you can get in from all directions. You know, big boxes don't like that because they want to have one place where you check out, one set of cash registers, because that's more efficient for them in terms of employees, but it means that everybody's got to funnel through one tiny entrance. What if you burn the whole place so you can't actually see it, or you can see it less? And with the idea that, hey, we're practically an island here, people are going to know where the store is. Do we really need to have a 100-foot sign and a building that is essentially operating as another sign because of its corporate dress? Can we make it a more pleasant place to spend time? Can there be shade? Can there be a water feature? Can there be places to sit? Can there be some icons that relate to other things in the town, like maybe a clock tower or something like that? There's a set of financial things people can do, that communities have done. Negotiated community contributions are really interesting. Is that for me?
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much. The negotiated community contributions are interesting. We are used to thinking about that in terms of casinos. You know, most of the casinos that have gone into town, into communities, thank you, have had to negotiate something, a contribution to local economic development, or building something else that the community wants, a high school or something. You can apply that same notion here, so long as it's set up front. Because again, we're going to this idea of, here are our criteria, take them, we've agreed on this as a community, take them or leave them, and we'll feel square about the whole situation. So one interesting thing that you can do is force an ongoing funding of a program that actually helps existing retailers, contributes to Main Street vitality, and is applied to or is otherwise applied to the places where your previous impact analysis discovered were the places of likely problem, whether it was affordable housing, or whether it was that nonprofits that serve populations in need were going to take a hit, wherever the point of impact is discovered to be. Another thing that towns do is they negotiate limitations on the square footage that is devoted to selling certain kinds of goods that they're particularly worried about. Sometimes it's done on a percentage basis, sometimes it's done on a flat square footage basis. So it's like, okay, you big box, you come in here, but you can't devote more than X number of square feet to hardware stores because we really want to protect our neighborhood hardware stores. You can't devote more than X square feet to groceries. That kind of limitation has been tested. And then looking at this whole panoply of types of requirements that you can do. The other thing is, well, what about incentives? You know, we've been talking entirely stick here, but what about carrot? And one of the sets of carrots that relates to something you might want is, what of these sorts of requirements, or something else, tax breaks or whatever, could we offer to motivate the big boxes to go where we want them to go to some old site, to go to the empty Kmart site, or to go to the side of town that we want them to wind up on. Whatever it is, can we identify what that is, and then give them a break from all this stuff to try to make it happen? All of this being complicated by the fact that they, all of them, have more money than God. And it's tricky to find something that they care about if they find the market appealing enough. But that is also the strength of it, that if they want our market, they will do these things, and they can. So don't we have some existing sites? If we're going to talk about redirecting their energy, we're going to talk about redirecting their energies, what do we have? Here's some things. And just to orient you, in case you need orienting, that is the existing Walmart right now. That is the Econo Foods. This is it's hard to see because it's got that one white roof on the furniture store, but it actually goes all the way around. This is the Cherry Point Mall. That is the dead Kmart. And that's the movie theater. That's the Pick and Save. And this is the chunk of land that Walmart's looking at for the supercenter. And so this chunk here is, I think it's either 17 or 14 acres. I think it's 17 acres. I'm almost positive it's 17 acres. So you can kind of look at the size of that chunk relative to just, say, for instance, this whole thing. Or you can look at this Walmart over here and notice this big empty space back here. Or you can notice the already amazing proximity between this Econo Foods and this Walmart. And one of the things that DPO has spent some time at the board level talking about is what might work a little better for all of us concerned. You know, and what if, instead of taking this nice chunk of land and then causing us to have to reinvest, and this is Alabama here, causing us to have to reinvest in Alabama and putting a light there, and all that kind of thing. Would it work? Could we, this Kmart here is about 85,000 square feet. You know, could you either tear it down and do something in here? Maybe take this too. But figure something out in here. That I don't mean to blop over the Aurora. I was just being sloppy with the light. That's the Aurora, that Huff type place. So could you know, it starts looking possible. It starts looking possible that, you know, that's a pretty tasty corner. That you could fit it all in there. It also starts looking possible that you could leave it where it is and just expand out the back. Okay? And for both this sort of solution over here and this sort of solution over here, another thing that comes to mind, and I am saying this entirely just as a sort of batting an idea around with a bunch of concerned folks, not having any idea whether any of these actors would find this appealing or not, but just saying, just for instance, it begs the question, like, okay, if Walmart wanted to expand this way, say, instead of that way for whatever reason, could we force them to take this Econo Foods and throw it on the west side where there is no grocery store? Similarly, with the Pick and Save. And so if you start believing that, if you come at this from a standpoint of essentially big boxes inevitable, let's get what we can out of it, whether it's in the form of protections for the folks we care about now, or whether it's in the form of avoided sprawl, whether it's in the form of a trade-off that makes things better for, in terms of the distribution of existing uses, whatever the aspect is, it starts to look more interesting, rather than just limiting the question to this chunk of land, which, by the way, again, I know some of you eat, breathe, and sleep this, but just for those of you who don't, this chunk of the city of Sturgeon Bay corporate limits go up 42 like that, and then they go around this site, and then they go back. This site actually this site is actually within the town of Sturgeon Bay, not the city. So this is a whole other annexation question.
Elaine,
Yeah?
behind Cherry Point Mall, there's also another.
Yes, yes it is. Thank you for pointing that out. This is the Cherry Point Mall, that's the bowling alley. And this way?
That's for sale.
What?
I think the bowling alley is for sale.
I think the bowling alley is for sale too. And you were talking about going this way, taking this whole thing out. So yeah, and Elaine raises a good point that you could tuck the whole thing this way. And essentially, and it might, I don't know what this is. Is this just, is this like agriculture, or is this what? What? Okay. Okay. And I'm doing this without benefit of knowing anything about these different chunks. But here, you could maybe you could help salvage this mall. And is this still empty, this big furniture place? Because it was empty. Yeah. You could maybe help salvage this mall by reconfiguring it somehow and attaching it on. One of the things we didn't talk about was that some places are obliging their big boxes to become part of mixed uses. And either incorporating other retail or even incorporating residential to make a town center. So with that, we're going to move on to our last discussion point here. What should we require and what do we want to happen? And I'm going to leave that up there in case anyone wants to talk about it. And Charlie, I saw your hand go up first.
You have to remember that there is a setback from the highway that would cut that 17 acres down to about 14 or 15. It would also cut the whole, as you notice, the Aurora Clinic is set back from the highway, and I expect they were set probably as close to the highway as they could get. You notice all the way down the line, all the buildings are set back at least that far. So this would somewhat diminish the land available there. The plus side is the Kmart parking lot has a runoff control structure in it now.
Yes.
I'm going to play a real wild devil with that. I'm Sam Walton. I want to build a Wal-Mart. I'm going to put a big grocery store in it. Why should I move Pick and Save? I can put them out of business. Let them move on their own.
Because we won't let you build it all if you don't.
That would be a thinking involved.
That would be the thinking.
Probably in there. And the other thing I've got is you talked about setting up parameters and forcing them to do what you want them to do in your setup. The biggest problem I see with that is we've got amateurs, local planners, local politicians, making rules, and they're fighting professionals, professional negotiators. We've got amateur negotiators fighting professional negotiators. So someplace that if you're going to negotiate, you got to get something that can go with their guns.
But the amateurs are more passionate about what's at stake, because it's their community character that's going to be at stake, right? So I would think they're going to stick to
That's
their
a
guns.
conflict board, and that's all a conflict board, and how these are going to go through. I mean, I think I've been involved in a lot of development work in Milwaukee and with the community, very, very concerned about its character, looking at development, looking for a range of development, and thinking we could set the requirements. And the city works with you, and everybody's working with you and acting like they're really listening to what you're saying, and in the meanwhile, the plan is just steamrolling in from the professionals.
Yeah, and I want to say something about this amateurs. You know, it isn't just that it's also that for most planners, there are a few things that you're only going to face once or twice in a career. You know, a stadium, a theme park, a couple of aggressive big boxes, whereas the folks on the other side do it all the time, and they know all the angles and everything else. And so it's not just the citizenry amateurs; it's that it's a skill set issue possibly that has to be overcome. More comments. Okay.
That's something I want to bring up too. I don't know if you're going to talk about this at another time, but
it seems to me that it's crucial that the voices of the community members get heard in this. And sometimes you need to learn special vehicles or tools in order to make that happen. Kind of need to force your voices to be heard. So will there at some point be a discussion about, I mean, you're being very thoughtful about what you want to have happen, but how do you ensure that those voices get through?
Yeah, and that's hard because I mean, there's been a lot of effort on the part of many groups who feel this way during the public debate so far. But this also brings us to the county plan and where it is and how you can get involved in that, because the where they are right now is that they've finished the population and housing element. They're wrapping up the transportation element. But they have not yet moved into the land use element, which is going to be this fall. And you guys all need to come out for the land use element, even though the situation in Wisconsin is that the county plans and the town plans, if the towns have their own plans, that they supersede the county. So that's a whole other issue too. I had promised the floor to Elaine, and then I want to give it to Pat, and then Alan, did you have anything? Okay. Elaine and then Pat, and then coming back over here to some of the folks over here that had their hands up.
2 points. One on the citizen thing. I think it's also important to understand that the professionals on the other side are very skilled at playing elected officials who may not be able to discern the truth. There's always this threat. We're going to go elsewhere if you don't let us go here. Asking for private meetings with each one of the elected officials. There's a whole host of things that they're very skilled at that the amateurs have a great deal of difficulty coping with, and sometimes may not even know are going on. Whereas people who've dealt with these before need to go. I think the other thing that really needs to, that local government really needs to do, and county government really needs to do, is understand that this isn't just about big boxes. There's a whole economic development planning going on in this community that is worried about all sorts of things, which a bunch of low-wage jobs don't help at all. And somebody needs to be putting together the packages and the incentives. We're spending a ton of money in one industry trying to have more building take place in the community, but we're willing to just abandon properties, potentially abandon properties, for somebody who's not bringing anywhere near the sort of economic impact to the community.
So far, the county has really not been involved in this big box issue. I know they're doing a comprehensive plan, but that will not take place until down the line. You mentioned earlier, Elaine, that the importance of looking at this from a regional standpoint, not just the city. And so far, the city has really been the only entity, jurisdiction, that has been involved. I think we need to be a part, we need to be a voice in expanding that beyond to the entire county and get the county, county involved.
Yeah, I would love to see people using the county comp plan process as a vehicle to make it known that you view this as of interest to you, despite the fact that you might live in a community 5, 10, 15, 20 miles away. More comments. I saw some over here. Hands are up. Yeah.
We can't get enough people to work at Bishop. Bishop pays good wage. Where are we going to get people to work at these big box stores and low-paying jobs? They have to subcontract people out to get people in.
Thank you for that.
And that's government money now, spending right now. Bishop.
more comments?
I just wanted to join my voice with Pat's because I live in the Brussels area, Little Sturgeon area, and so I feel like this is going to impact our county, which is, important to me, but I don't feel like I have a voice in, I don't feel like I have a voice. So I think it is important that we get involved at the county level because it's happening on the city property or something that's going to be annexed to the city, and I don't have any way of stopping it or, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I think it's important that, yes, we also get involved on the county level. And I don't know how to do that because, getting involved in the comprehensive plan, it's like you said, if the city already has something in place, it supersedes the county's comprehensive plan, so, you're left out in the cold.
Charlie, and then I'll come back over to you.
You have to remember that the county is a separate entity from the city, very separate. The city will do as they please, and the county will follow along. So the place to do it is at the county. The political climate is that the city is the one that is going to be making the decision. Unless invited in, unless the other governments are invited in any more than you at your town level would invite a county official to come in and tell the county what you want to do. County planning did not go over very good when we told Sister Bay what they should do.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's the reality of it.
Extraterritorial intervention is always complicated. Betty, you had your hand up.
Well, we're an aging population in Georgetown. And a lot of people, they're not going to be able to drive if they live in Fish Creek or Sister Bay or other little cities, and they're not going to shop at a big box store because they can't get there. And the schools, the school population, high school and beyond.
Declining school population. When you brought up declining school population, what was the aspect of that what was the aspect of declining school population that you were looking at?
Well, are the young people going to come back and live in this area, or are they going to look for jobs?
Oh yeah, and that goes to Elaine's point about economic development, that if our goal is to enable our children to come back and live here too, and maybe to go to the big city for a couple years, but to come back, there need to be jobs here that are that are possible for them to raise a family on. Yeah. Okay, Chrissy, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to actually counter Charlie's statements about the county not getting involved. The county has to change the county representatives have to change that. Sturgeon Bay is part of the county. As a matter of fact, it's the heart. And the county has to protect its heart just like a human has to protect it, to make a good system. And there's absolutely a mindset. Sturgeon Bay has 7 city representatives that are told perpetually that they shouldn't consider Sturgeon Bay's interests. And our interests are Ellison Bay's interests and Brussels' interests, and vice versa. We all drink the same water, we swim in the same bay. What Sturgeon Bay does can have an immense impact on tourism, which has an impact on Fish Creek. It's inexcusable that we allow our county board to continue to ignore aspects of what impacts this county as a whole. One more real quick point. That spectrum, in order to really make a change, you have to have the opposites. And so often in the county, we negotiate to the middle way too early. And personally, I think this is way too early, saying that we've looked at the expenses of these projects, and there's no facts that support going to the middle. There's nothing there. There is no supportive facts on the table that say that a superstore is an asset in any sense of any direction. So going to the middle as a leapfrog over saying, I'm sorry, I'm opposed until you provide some sort of proof that it's sustainable, it's economic, it's environmental, give me one thing. It is throwing away an opportunity that, and basically making the people who really want it just to cover up the mistake on another tax faux pas that they made, cover this tax up with that tax. I'm going to stay on the far edges, and I'm going to fight like a radical, and hopefully then the good people who may actually find a middle ground will have an opportunity to have somebody present something that justifies it, because there is no justification for it.
Thank you. Well, I think having those voices is a really important part of the community collectively figuring out what to do, and figuring out what's worth it, and understanding the trade-offs involved, so that some kind of intelligent decision can be made, whether it's some sort of negotiation towards the middle, or utter refusal, or somewhere in between. Lane, and then I'm going to come back over here, as I think I saw some hands out of the corner of my eye.
I guess in terms of the county's role in this, I think first the county has to demonstrate more leadership than it has in the past, and it has to break free of kind of just planning by rote. It is amazing to me that for all of the conversation that everybody talks about is how worried about they are on the character of the community, that wasn't where they started their planning. They're just, we're going to do the transportation element, we'll do the housing element. Yeah, you have to do the population forecasting early on, but then somebody ought to be saying, what is really the vision for this county? How are we going to preserve the character, and how can we have economic growth while preserving the character? And that would then dictate a bunch of other things, and that is absent. The county has oftentimes in the past tried to do as little as possible to create a much better county.
Jenna.
I would just add that that's exactly, I think, where to start. And that's what gives people voices, credibility. When you're working around a vision that you see as, you're really part of a vision. It's one thing to be part of a fight, and I've been part of plenty of fights, but this is the kind of fight that's really hard. You're got to know who you're up against, and the savvy. And even in hearing your voices, having the voices heard, when it's in a fight, it's a lose-lose. I mean, it's accounted for. They know how to take the voices and say, okay, now we have this hearing, this hearing, this hearing. They stack. There's all kinds of other stuff that happens, and it doesn't. You're not really heard. But in a positive vision, where you're looking to say, what do we want, and how do we want that to look? That's how you get, I think, kids planning to come back. This is the place I want to be. This is a vibrant, character-filled community that I want to
enjoy being part of. Well, actually, being part of a fight, in a way it's worse than that, because what happens is it becomes a war of attrition, where and these guys are, the big boxes, that's what they do, and they can outlast us, and unless we're strong. They can outfight us, they can outlast us, they can outspend us.
Let me clarify the word fight. It doesn't mean...
No, I hear you.
It means to have conviction and insist on it.
Right.
Information and facts, not to draw lines in the sand and say, that's as far, just to clarify.
And I just want to say again, I fought for a lot of things. I've done a ton of things. They've all gotten accomplished until I got into that one in the city where the big numbers, the big guys were involved. And it's just,
It's a different thing. Jill and then Charlie.
I just had a question. I know in our town, we did the plan, we're in the final stages of our second plan, and we started with a visioning process. So I'm wondering, did not your county start with that? We sent out surveys and there was, we had Oh, you something mean in to work what? in Door County.
No.
No visioning.
No, it's being approached much more as a technical document than as it's being approached more as a technical document than as a community agent for change.
Because we did all those elements you did too. We looked at our transportation and what it is now, and then
And then you go forward. Yeah, I mean, there's myriad approaches to comprehensive plan, and many of them start out with vision exercises and goals and community preference surveys and all that kind of stuff. This one, however, is being much more technical. Let's see. I promised Charlie, and then Ron, you had your hand up, right? Okay.
Sorry to take up so much time, but I take issue with this planning by road. You have to have rules. You cannot, if you're going to administer something, speaking from the administration side, if you're going to administer something, you got to, this is what it says, this is what we say it's supposed to do, and interpret that. If you do not, you wind up planning by or acting by political influence. Good example is Madison, the one that comes along with the most money gets the goods. And if you don't have this laid out ahead of time, you have a roadmap, so to speak. And the comprehensive plan is intended for this roadmap. But that also includes the opinions of many people rather than the people in this room that come here for a purpose. They have an interest. Thank God they got an interest. But it can also be a conflict of interest with the general population. So this is the reason for having ordinances and things like that that are laid out. It doesn't suit everybody all the time. You never can please everybody all the time. Believe me, in 14 years on RPC, I did not please a whole lot of people all the time. But we tried to do what is in the ordinance. If the ordinance did not agree with this, then we worked to change the ordinance. But have the roadmap, as I said at the beginning, plan this out, have the roadmap there, so you say, hey, developer, you will put in the street, you will put in the sewer, you will, and they say we can't do it. Well, you can't have your conditional use permit then. They change their mind very quickly.
Ron, and then Peter, and then we're going to wrap up this session.
I'd like to say this as chairperson of ecology and recycling in southwest of Milwaukee in our small community. I can tell you from experience that as passionate people and interested in a certain thing and the environment, and when you're in a committee and you're trying to influence elected officials, you start at the town level, then you go to the city level, then you go to the county level, then you go to the state level. I can tell you from experience, it is a real task. I agree with Charlie. There are rules. There are so many different influences that you get. For instance, you would have one special meeting. I would have tremendous phone calls from all different kinds of sides. And they all want to talk to me outside the block. They want to meet me in a restaurant or in a public place, but they want to meet with me private to convince my members to vote differently or how I should vote. And now you think about this, and people, I can tell you, the smallest even look like a burning issue of leaves. It's a tremendous. You can't fathom as the elected official and the things that he will have coming at him from all different kinds of sides. I can look at that map, I can see the people that own the land, I can see the suits coming down, and you have no idea, people, unless you've been involved, of what you are up against.
I rather suspect Charlie has an idea of it. But yeah, no, thank you for those insights. Peter, you had your hand up?
It's about the low price issue.
Yeah.
Wal-Mart claims to own low prices, but they're not the lowest prices in the county. For good stuff, you get better bargains at Yonkers, and for junk, you get better prices at the dollar stores. The question is whether the newspaper or anybody, the Chamber of Commerce or anything could emphasize the fact that we can get lower prices on something. I bought a lawnmower 2 weeks ago at Trailash's, and I paid the same amount for a good brand with service as I would have paid at Walmart. But people don't know that because they get away with that low price propaganda. They own that brand. Some publicly supported PR would be indicated.
Which goes in a way to some of the points earlier about forcing the funding of helping small businesses compete. As we come to an end this morning, does anybody have any final comments that they want to leave us with here in the room?
Just thank you for doing it.
We appreciate all of you coming, and thank you for all of your insights and comments. Yes?
Would you like to run for office?
Would you?
I am considering that.
I got just a couple of comments. One thing on your comment about contacting people. I used to work for the DNR. Now some people that's damn near Russia and other people that's right. But I've been into some of these hassles and stuff. And I noticed in the towns that I worked in, I worked with a lot of fire departments. I was a forest ranger, real smoke eater. And one of the things I noticed in those towns is there are certain people in towns, not necessarily the mayor, not necessarily a councilman. Sometimes it's a councilman's wife. But these people make things happen. Digging them out can be a little bit of a problem sometimes. But once you find them, they're good. And so don't always look and blame the mayor, don't always look and blame the village board or the town board or the county board. There's somebody underneath there sometimes that can do you a lot of good. Sometimes you find one on the county board that'll do you a lot of good. They have a lot of influence that you never realized was there. Another thing that I found worked very well is to determine whose ox is being gored. If it's your ox, you're upset. If Wal-Mart would come into town and develop a bank, you think Bodwin's might come unglued? The bank? You darn right they would. So this is the type of thing you have to put your comparisons in. Find out what that person's ox is, and if you show how a large-scale development is going to hurt them, you can suddenly get a real good friend in a hurry that you never expected. Another thing that happens on these that I've noticed is very often these developers and things come in and they don't really understand some of the local traditions, people, actions, things that happen. It's similar to a southern itinerant minister that was driving along the road one day and he saw 8 people standing out in a field with a pile of dirt. He stopped and he went over there and he looked and here's this big cement thing. My gosh, they buried somebody. He looks up, he says, has anybody said any words? He said, no. So he started. He started with Genesis, he went up through the Old Testament, into the New Testament, he turned around, he came back through the New Testament, into the Old Testament, and started through it again. 2 hours later, he finally finishes, he picks up a clod of dirt, he throws it on the grave, and walks away. One of the guys looks at the other one, and he says, he must be new around here. Doesn't recognize a septic tank cover. So don't forget that some of this stuff is new, and some of it has to be explained very carefully. Another one is this getting the word out to people. It's similar to a man that died and went to heaven. And he got up there and they were very busy. And St. Peter says they're having a council. What's it about? And they invited him into the council. God was sitting on the throne and everybody was around, and they said, we're having a lot of problems on earth. And we've determined that we have to do something. We have to tell people what's going on. We have to, he says, we're going to, since you're new and you understand it, we're going to send you back for 6 months. You come back and you report. He came back after 6 months and he's reporting to the council, and he says, you know, he says, I've checked it out. He says, there's about 10 to 15% of the people on earth are great. They're good, they're doing all the right things, similar to us. Everybody's great. And then he says there's another 10 to 15% of the people that you're never going to change their mind. They know it all, they've got their mindset, you're never going to change their mind. But in between that is that 60 to 80% of the people whose minds can be changed. He says, we have to do something. God looks and he says, well, how about if we send a letter to those 10% of the good people and we explain to them the problems and explain to them that they have to contact these people in the middle whose minds are able to be changed. Everybody votes that that's a good idea. You know what that letter said?
Yeah.
You got one?
I got one.
You didn't get one either. Okay, so we have to understand that in this whole situation, an old saying really comes true. We has met the enemy, and he is us. Remember Bogle? That's who said that one. So that's all I've really got to say. I want to thank Elaine again. There's some thought-provoking ideas in it. You're a wonderful audience as far as staying on time, staying on track. Nobody got tangled up too bad. And 2 little announcements. One is Justin made this tape. He's going to have it available in the library. And if you want to buy one, it's also going to be played on the local channels here at Sebastopol and Sturgeon Bay. Or if you want to get one from him, you contact Justin and he can put your name down and you can get a hold of a copy of the tape if it went out today. The second thing is there's a lot of coffee and a lot of donuts left, so please take 1 or 2 for the road. Thank you.